For our next panel, do you want to come up to the front? So we have Theo Bell, who's head of AI products at Rhymes Technology. We have Saumya Aggarwal, who works at Bloomberg, is the EMEA Lead AI Solutions, and Rosie Nnace, who's an AI and data expert at Norton Rose Fulbright, a law firm.
Right. So we did have a plan, right?
We did have a plan.
We do have a plan. Excellent.
Yes, I think you're
So the plan is we're gonna introduce ourselves first, give a little bit of story about our journey, and then talk a little about the risks and opportunities with AI skills and just, I guess, AI in general, just from our perspective. So, I grew up in Eastern Canada in a relatively small place, and ended up going to university there studying chemistry. And then I sort of thought, I don't really want to spend my whole life in a lab doing the same reaction for my whole career. So I switched to mechanical engineering, which seemed more interesting, and ended up sort of just doing a master's degree. Then I sort of wanted to keep learning. So I did a PhD actually over here at Cambridge, and that's what brought me to the UK. And my plan was always to go back and be a professor because I really liked learning and I liked helping other people learn. But then I found myself just in a room by myself all the time, staring at a screen. And I thought, I want to work with people. So somebody suggested I do an internship in finance. So I actually did that during my PhD, which my advisor strongly I guess he had to object to officially. But I spent the summer working at Goldman Sachs in a variety of different roles. And it was just fascinating. The whole world of finance was totally new to me. And I really, really enjoyed it. And so my plan was to go back and finish my PhD and then join full-time there, which I did. And I spent pretty much 8 years working there in the equities electronic trading desk, sort of, I guess, the interface between the clients and the algorithms, and so the buttons they were pressing and making sure that they were picking the right algorithm for the job, making sure they were picking the right time of day to click the button, that kind of thing. And so it was a really neat way of sort of combining technology and people and sort of interacting with both bits. I eventually got sick of the big corporate game, and my friends said to me, I'm at Palantir, do you want to come join us? It's really fun. And so I did, and I went there for 8 years, and it was a lot of fun. Worked with Airbus for 3 years on the final assembly line, helping them make planes better, the NHS, the Ministry of Defense, lots of different use cases, but basically lots of common problems, which is everybody has little bits of data everywhere, and it's very hard to make sort of data-driven decisions in an organized way because you don't have a common data model. And so that's something I feel really strongly about still. And when I joined Rhymes just about 2 years ago, actually, as head of AI product, my original task was do AI product stuff, great. But then I sort of quickly realized that we needed something internally as well to be able to allow us to do AI on top of our data. And we didn't have a great data model or anything. So I brought in the Palantir software, and we've been working on that for over a year now. And it's so amazing to see every day I walk past people's desks and they're building stuff in it, whether that's a new pricing calculator or a way of generating marketing content or analyzing how long it takes the data to flow through our pipes. Like there's just so many different use cases, and it's really cool. So that's sort of my story, I guess, and how I got here.
Perfect. Well, I'm squeezed in middle with a PhD and on the left and a lawyer on the right. So my journey hasn't been that comprehensive as Theo was mentioning. I grew up in India. I came from a very humble background, did my master's, and at the time I started working as a radio jockey. That was my first job with All India Radio, which happened to be at that time the biggest radio station. Quickly I rose up the ranks, and I was interviewing Prime Minister of India, cabinet ministers, and it became a political show. From there, it was a bureaucratic organization, as you can imagine. These government organizations, they're not the best place to think about your career or pay you the money that I required at the time. So then I joined my client, Microsoft, whose products at the time, Windows was a big initiative for them from a piracy perspective. A lot of pirated Windows were going on, especially in the emerging market. And I was promoting a lot of their products through my speeches and through the radio programs. And through that collaboration, I went and joined Microsoft in their marketing division, did that for a couple of years. In between, I also went into ION. I think there was a panelist before who mentioned about ION Group. So I was there predominantly in sales servicing division. And from there, I joined Bloomberg. Everything happened by chance. I had no clue about finance, about ION, about Bloomberg at the time. But I joined Bloomberg in India, did that for 3.5 years, was fairly lucky to then be placed in Singapore for 4 years, and now for last 7 years in London. I have been in business predominantly running some of the most complex relationships, including Goldman Sachs. I hate to say this, but nobody wants to do that kind of job. Managing some of the most complex banks and hedge funds. Did that fairly successfully. And at that time, Bloomberg was coming up with Bloomberg GPT, which you guys might have read through, and I was the first hire into the team to represent Bloomberg GPT externally. Guess what? I grew up with large language models? No. So first thing I said to my management, while it's a fancy title, it's a privilege to represent Bloomberg GPT, but I have no clue about large language models. And then I was on the first plane into Harvard to really learn the ropes into AI. So the point that I'm trying to make, that it's not about where you have come from. If you are keen to learn, you can pretty much represent and you can learn and do a justification to that particular role. And here I am leading the initiative across Europe, Middle East, and Africa at this point. Over to Rosie.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd really echo that. So in terms of what I do, I am the senior knowledge lawyer looking after AI and data knowledge in a big law firm. So what that means is that I get to spend my time unpacking developments in technology and the law and strategizing on how to comply with them. So it's a really interesting job. I get to spend a lot of time at the intersection of policy and law, so tracking legislation as it's making its way through the process. I get to spend a lot of time working with colleagues internationally, figuring out what's going on in their jurisdictions and working out the global landscape. And I get to spend a lot of time at the intersection of tech and the law, so sort of translating between the technology and the law. Interesting and varied. I spend most of my time on client-facing work, so advising fintechs, firms, and large corporates. And I also do a little bit of internal-facing, so using AI and legal tech in the law firm, which is really interesting too. So in terms of how I got there, I did a history degree, so didn't come from any kind of technical background, and then went into a legal career from that. I trained as a solicitor at another big law firm and sort of was interested in tech, managed to find my way to the right person to talk to get into the team that advised on mostly IT contracts, and they did a little bit of what was then a niche specialism of data protection law. And so I got into that team, started working in data protection, and then the general data protection regulation came in. So it's actually much more of a specialism now than it was. And so I got to be full-time in data law for quite a while. In terms of how I made my way into AI, I think it's the story of a lot of lawyers from various backgrounds, but quite a lot of data protection lawyers, particularly because we've got the skill set about navigating complex regulation, protecting rights, working out really interesting data problems. So I started to see the opportunities in AI and started saying, oh, this is interesting, flagging opportunities. Had to do a lot of upskilling, as everyone else has been saying, really, that it's a lot of on-the-job learning about the tech. Made it known that I was interested, started sort of making the opportunities, really. And before I knew it, I was the go-to person for AI knowledge. So shall we move into opportunities there? I think it's a good segue.
Should we start with Theo?
Yeah.
Sure. So opportunities. I think just sort of, following on from what Rosie said, like I wasn't really formally trained in AI either, right? I just sort of spent some time in the summer of 23 when I was between jobs learning about AI. And I think like that's sort of one of the opportunities is that it's constantly moving and there's constantly more to learn. And it's kind of an empty space. I mean, it's obviously been around for a few years now, but in general, it's not something like, for instance, the law, I guess, where we've had lawyers forever and you need to sort of like get into it. It's sort of like, it's there for the taking, right? So I think like that's one key thing. The sort of newer, the agents, the MCP protocols, all that stuff is super cool, I think, because you can really connect anything to anything. You can build stuff where the data is, and you can serve it where the users need it. And I think that's like a really interesting opportunity. And then I think somebody said on the panel earlier, using AI as a mentor, not at getting it to do your work for you, but helping you to learn things, helping you to think about, whether it's product strategy or whatever thing that you think you need some help with, just asking it to help you think through it. And that's like one of the use cases that I've been doing recently as my role sort of evolving a bit.
Amazing. Well, you touched on a couple of interesting points. So if you look at AI as an enabler for opportunities, well, I'm actually thrilled to be here. Not only because the world is now moving into AI, but especially if you look at finance and fintech, there are so many opportunities that AI is trying to attack. And I believe more than ever, it's an existential threat to companies which previously had a free run for, let's say, 10 years, 15 years, who you look at some of the biggest banks, some of the biggest asset managers, but now everyone has to embrace AI to remain relevant to the future world, to the future audience. So I think it's an incredible amount of opportunity. This morning, I was running very simplistic analysis on our career website. So if you go to careers.bloomberg.com, and if you look at the open roles for London, there are 71 as of this morning. AI as a keyword have been mentioned in 22 of them. So even if you look at maybe 2 years back, none of the job description would have AI mentioned in the job description. But now 22 out of 71, at least on our website today, mentions about AI. So that's how critical it is. And you don't need to be an expert in AI. You just need to be using AI. You just need to be aware of AI to actually get into a lot of those jobs today. In terms of opportunities, we see multiple amount of use cases. We have been very lucky, right at the forefront of this technology. In 2018, our, of course, CEO kind of drummed the beat every day that he took the right call. At the time, we had two choices, either to invest in blockchain or to invest in large language model. We were the first one in finance area to create a large language model from scratch. We named it Bloomberg GPT and so on and so forth. So we have seen this kind of journey for the last 7 years and so, being right in the middle of financial industry, connecting both buy side and sell side. I think the opportunity is humongous to impact not only the trading aspects, but also to impact the customer interaction, the way electronic trading is happening, and the way you connect all the dots together from front office trading all the way back to the settlement. There is an AI component everywhere. And I think the way complexities are moving, the way regulation is moving and making it more transparent, to remain relevant, to remain abreast into the future, you have to embrace AI in a lot of those things. And from an opportunity perspective, if you're not thinking about AI, as I said, 22 out of 71 is a fairly decent chunk to be thinking about AI today. Rosie.
Thank you. Yeah, it leads nicely into, so I suppose, interesting perspective that the opportunities and the risks are kind of, there's an overlap in the legal space, because advising on responsible AI is the opportunity, and it's a sort of a large portion of what I do. So I work with lots of in-house lawyers, and it's something that I do myself for my own firm as well. And that there's a lot of excitement about the use cases and the technology and what it can do, and working with relevant stakeholders, working with the teams that are delivering it to deliver it responsibly. So in terms of what responsible AI is and sort of where we come at it from a legal perspective, we're looking at managing the legal risks, so risks like the liabilities, but also intellectual property, and also making sure that these projects are rolled out in line with the hard legal requirements. So you start from what you must do, but then you can't avoid, there is a huge degree of overlap, even if you don't set out to do it, that you're looking at what you should do. You're looking at the ethical application of AI. And a lot of the laws that we look at are very deeply rooted in ethical principles. So data protection law that I came from is about protecting fundamental rights. Laws against non-discrimination are about protecting fundamental rights. And financial services regulations about protecting consumers. So there are great opportunities for that ethical perspective. And in terms of the types of use case that we look at, I suppose the risk side often ends up in the news. So, for example, recently an airline wanted to roll out a chatbot, and that is a great opportunity, bring efficiency, customer service chatbots, but they just hadn't quite done enough thinking it through and testing. And then a customer was asking it about the bereavement refund policy, and you get the chatbot merrily telling the customer, yeah, sure, go ahead, book your flight, you can claim a refund. And then it turned out that the chatbot had hallucinated the policy. So you get the customer going to court and trying to claim the refund. And yeah, the airline did in fact have to pay the refund. So those are the kind of risks that we manage. So just thinking about, so what testing we need to do, what risks that we need to think about so that you can have those great opportunities. And things are going to get even more exciting with AI agents. And I think there's a session later today on using those with Google technology. So once you've got something that is taking actions autonomously, there are incredible opportunities, but there's also sort of different angles you need to think about from a risk perspective. So moving, shall I segue into risks as well? I suppose, yeah. Right. I will keep talking about risks then. Well, risks and skills, really, because I think they really go hand in hand in the legal space. So as a lawyer in the AI space, I suppose one thing that I couldn't not talk about is risk of misuse of AI. So there are quite a few cases now where a lawyer makes submissions in a court, and the judge looks at the cases they've cited and goes, hang on, don't recognize this one. And then it turns out that actually they just used an LLM to draft the whole thing, hadn't checked the citations, and they're hallucinated because LLMs are very good at coming up with something that looks like a case, but just isn't. So there's been over 200 of those type of cases in the US, apparently. But we're not immune in the UK. A tracker I was looking at recently said that there'd been 12. So I suppose, I think what I take from that is it really highlights the core skills that you need as a lawyer, and probably in a lot of other jobs right now as well, that critical thinking is still key. That's always been the foundation of being a lawyer. It's always been the foundation of most jobs, really, that you need critical thinking, reasoning. So, those are the skills that will take you forward, both in terms of being able to do the job. But now we've got all these new technologies available. It's also really important to apply that to what is the right technology for the job. And is this right? Am I using it in the right way as well? And I think to move on to a really positive note, often in law, the things that AI really is good at are quite boring tasks. So I think metaphorically, law is an area where we really might get AI doing the dishes for us. So the types of use cases that are already pretty mature in some law firms are things like going through lots and lots of contracts in a big due diligence exercise in an M&A, or in a big litigation going through lots and lots of documents for disclosure. And it's not something that you want to be doing as a human. So being able to work with AI on those kind of tasks is a real benefit and a real opportunity. So I think, there is a really good opportunity for AI to free up lawyers to do the interesting tasks going forward.
Interesting. Maybe I'll go next, if that's right. I'll give you three things. One is the boring answer. So what kind of risks are there with AI? So when we look at risks, we generally classify in a framework called MORE, which is model risk, operational risk, regulatory risk, and ethical risk. But that's the boring answer. What is my personal interpretation? There is no risk. If you are looking at AI, there are so many things to do. You can create something new. You can create so many different job titles. You can actually make people so much efficient. So if I were you, coming out of college, coming out of uni at this point in time, I will focus mainly on opportunities rather than risk. So that's my interpretation from a selfish perspective. Thirdly, where Theo was going earlier in terms of MCP, does anyone know here maybe we'll, just in interest of time, we'll quickly open it to the floor. Anyone knows what exactly is MCP? Go on. Fair. Anyone uses Apple here? iPhones? Few of you. Anyone uses Android? Few hands up. Okay, great. Now imagine the world where iPhone had a different charger and Android had a different charger, the C-type. And then European Union came up with a regulation that Apple actually adhered to the Type-C, and both the chargers became similar. So my wife, who is an Apple fan, uses the C-type charger now, which I have historically been using for last 10 years and so. So now we are at a parity and don't have to look for multiple chargers anymore. Exactly same thing with MCP. In a layman term, what you are trying to do is to create a common denominator, and then you can plug and play into any platform, whether it's Apple, whether it's Android. So there are so many opportunities. I would rather not talk too much about risk, but focus on the opportunities that this world has created for all of us.
Bold statements, but yes, I think it's true. You should always focus on opportunities, being mindful of risks. And I think one of the risks of getting AI to do your work for you is that you don't actually ever get any good at the work and you forget how to do it. So I think it's better to use it to help you learn or to help you do things. Like a friend asked me the other day, to help him with his CV. And I said, well, I will put your CV into the model and I will put the job description into the model, but I'm going to get the model to say, how should I edit this CV to make it better for this job, rather than getting it to do the whole thing, because A, it'll probably make stuff up, and also I'll never get any better at actually writing these things, right? So I think use it as a mentor, use it as a guide, and don't let it make you lazy and be bad at things that are actually quite important. And then I think the sort of governance and gaps, and I guess some of the stuff, Rosie, you were talking about using it safely, like there's still so many policies that are missing, right? I mean, like we have a policy that says basically like, don't do stupid stuff with AI, but it's like, that's pretty broad. So like every use case, you have to think quite carefully, like, what is this going to look like if it's on the front page of the paper that my company did X with our clients' data or leaked something or stuff like that? And so I think like you always have to think about like what are the governance gaps that are still around, and you can always suggest things, right? If you think there's a risk, tell your boss, tell somebody that you think there's a risk that you want to put some guardrails around to help reduce. And then I think the other one is just still bias and explainability, right? Like it's still very easy to get a model to give you a sort of really unfair and unethical answer to things, and that's something that they're obviously getting better at. But you need to remember, particularly if you're talking about hiring or making loan recommendations or things like that, you need to remember that the models may not actually have been trained on the data that we might hope that they would be trained on. And then this is something we've not really talked about, but at Rhymes we do enterprise data management for financial services firms, and so we have almost 900 data partners where we take data from every day and sort of massage and correct and check it and pass it off to our clients sort of as data as a service.
But the best is Bloomberg?
Well, no, you're not the worst. But many of these data providers are actually putting clauses in the contract saying you can't put our data into any AI or any system that contains AI. And obviously, like even Excel has AI today. Like it's very much impossible to comply with that regulation, but it's because they're trying to protect their IP and things like that. And so I just thought that was an interesting thread that actually connected all of our worlds, really.
I guess should we open up to the
couple of
floor?
minutes for questions.
So how does your team usually get a buy-in from you, like in relation to AI projects? Like how would you put the AI project that will come very much from like very junior people in the company? How do you do that? And basically this happens, so it doesn't always happen for seniors.
Okay, so I think the question was how do we make sure that anybody in the company can suggest an AI product and then that goes into the prioritization properly? Yeah, it's a good question, and I think originally people didn't really have many ideas, but now that everybody's been using it for a couple of years, there's lots of different ideas. And one of the key things that I'm trying to do is actually I've called it rather boringly an AI working group, but it's basically like having a sort of champion in each part of the business who's sort of responsible for, in some ways, filtering the ideas from their team, but also making sure that their team is upskilled and aware. are, because everybody has different skill levels. And, you know, sometimes people come to me and say, I'm really embarrassed, but I don't know anything about AI. I'm like, that's fine, but we need to figure out what training to give them. There's tons of stuff out there, as discussed, YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever. You can learn anywhere, but we need to make sure we connect the right people with the right things. But it's sort of, I guess, making sure that you have frameworks like that where anybody can suggest things, so that it's not just like top down. But I think the importance of having the sort of central, you know, like my team sort of manage all of that is that we want to make sure that it's consistent and that we're not sort of, you know, unintentionally building the same chatbot in two different places or something like that.
Yeah, and I think the key thing for law firms has been sort of, having those structures in place as well, and having people whose job it is to work with the tech and work on innovation, which, I mean, it sounds very obvious, but I think that in previous generations there'd maybe been a perception that was something you do side of desk, but now we've got a really great team who spend their time working with the tech, and you can work with them on projects. And so I suppose it helps have that framework as well. So that's been a really positive thing about making sure that people are empowered to innovate and to bring something forward.
Interesting. If there are no further questions, maybe I can...
There was some more over there.
Okay, maybe I'll take that. So look, I guess the question is that how blockchain as a separate technology and how AI as a separate technology is impacting finance. I do not have much thing to offer on blockchain because we have looked at it and we have consciously passed on that particular opportunity. We believe that at least for us, there is no meat out there to go after at this point in time. But from AI perspective, internally, and I'll give you a very simple example. In 2007, we were tasked to look at that how we would procure financial data from the quarterly and the annual reports. At the time, let's say if Vodafone is coming up with their quarterly numbers, somebody manually was going in, procuring the revenue number, EBITDA number, and putting that onto Bloomberg Terminal. That was very manual. Guess what? It was error prone. It was also making us slow down when it comes to procuring that number, putting that onto terminal, and actually producing that to our clients who were using terminals to make their financial decisions. So we experimented with a very simplistic AI model, nothing to do with generative AI at that time, which can procure those numbers as a first cut. And the way Vodafone reports the number versus the way IBM reports the number is slightly different. But that model was nimble enough to procure those numbers as a first cut. And then, of course, have two more human layers to cross-check everything before it actually goes out to our clients, and they pay us the top dollars to rely on the data that goes onto our network. And from there, we have gone strength to strength. But there is the opportunity is not only from data procurement, where we originally started from, but also to look at the deduplication on news articles. If New York Times comes up with an article on Donald Trump, and I was doing this analysis maybe last month, there were 66,000 news articles that came on Donald Trump in a week. I'm sure there are some Spider-Mans and Supermans in the room which can read through those 66,000 articles in a week. At least I can't. But there is an opportunity to use AI technology to deduplicate and bundle those articles. Let's say 20,000 of them are talking about the Ukraine and Russian war. 20,000 of them are talking about a particular topic, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of application that we see in presenting that information in a neater, cleaner, quicker way to our customers so that they can rely on our network to make those financial decisions faster.
Matt's here, that means it's over, right?
Yeah. Are your firms hiring at the moment, hiring grads?
We are in some locations only right now. I don't think we're hiring many in London, but we often do internships, and I think you might have noticed some of the prizes are some internships at Rhymes, and those I think are great opportunities to get your foot in the door, and then make sure that your name's first on our list when we do need grads.
Yeah, one of those former interns just got a full-time role somewhere else as well, but on the back of what they did at Rhymes. We'll wrap up that one. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.